everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Accommodation Show. This week, we're joined by one of the most interesting people that I've met on my tours of the US, of Canada, of the world. Met this man in Miami 3 years ago now, I think it was. Mr. Matt Landau, welcome to the show.
Hello, Mr. Bart Sobies. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. A little bit giddy.
Great. So am I.
Giddy with excitement. I think the one thing that we did share was quite big and broad smiles when we first met, and I remember seeing you in Miami, and you had done a presentation which was really fantastic because it brought in an element of art and an element of doing things differently and an element of thoughtfulness as well. It wasn't just about, hey, I'm gonna go and present and explain to you things. It was about trying to play with people's minds a bit and bring art into the presentation. So I don't know. Did I get it right? Was that what your intention?
Yeah, that was accurate. I had forgotten about that experience, but you're right. I hired a dancer to come on stage and freeform dance, like interpretive dance, his version of this concept that I was trying to teach, and it was hilarious. I don't think anyone really knew what was going on, but that was like kind of the point.
I find it really inspiring because my background is in sound, audio, creating music. I'm actually a DJ as well. It's something that you probably don't know. But at our last conference, we had a live artist painting throughout the conference and creating a new sort of angle and a new point of engagement. And you know, when you're sort of almost like distracted by, or when you're concentrating on somebody talking, or the panels and all this stuff, and you're doing it all day, it's nice to have, when your mind is not on them, to go into art or to go into another space that's kind of really safe.
Yeah, I actually just attended a conference in Tangier, Morocco. It was called the House of Beautiful Business. And that was my big aha moment was, wow, conferences can be beautiful. I mean, this thing was hosted inside of a former presidential palace with
Yeah.
open air, tangerine trees and this stage that looked like a catwalk through the courtyard. And it was just beautiful. And
Yeah, wow.
that really opened my eyes to, wow, there's a whole side to these conferences that maybe we have been ignoring over the years. We tend to do most of our conferences inside of convention centers.
Yeah, look, 100%. We're running. I don't want to use this episode to push what we're doing with Strive, but 100%. The spaces are so critical, and it's not that I don't want to do them in a hotel or in a standard conference space, but how can I make it different? How can I make an experience? Because I think it's an experience that I'm trying to create, not a conference. I want people to be in that experience together and share something, and then to own them to be the only ones to kind of have that experience. And that's what it is. It's like going to a live show, right? You go to a live show, you see it once, and they can perform the same song over and over and over again, but that experience you share with that community and that crowd can never be replicated.
I mean, you think about restaurants, a really bespoke, high experience level restaurant serves food
Yeah.
in the same way that a cheap fast food restaurant serves food. But there's this whole additional layer of art and personality to the special experience, things that we feel that are good feelings, as opposed to things that we feel that are not so good. And I think we as hospitality providers ultimately have to incorporate that into our day to day. It's not something many of us were necessarily trained in. Hospitality is all about experience design. And frankly, I never even knew that that was a job title up until this event in Tangier, where I learned that this whole thing was put on by experienced designers. What is that? I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I have been overlooking this whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's amazing. My mind is going all over the place in terms of events and creativity, and folks, that's a topic that we're going to come back to today. Is where we're at in the industry, what Matt's up to with his doings in his day to day. The If you are not following Matt, and if you don't know who Matt is, then this episode will give you a bit of an intro into who he is and what he's doing. Um, and then if you're looking for a bit of creativity, a bit of inspiration, and kind of a bit of a what next, a bit of a stop what you're doing, have a listen, and rewire your brain a bit. That's what we're going to attempt to achieve today. Um, Matt runs an amazing community. I get your emails. I believe they're weekly or every 2 weeks. And there's always some sort of a fantastic story in them, which I really enjoy reading. And that's something that I think for me personally, I'd aspire to, is to be able to write in the same way that you do. Um, or in a similar way, right, with my own voice. So, and that's a really great community. You do a lot of in the past few years. You've been doing events as well and bringing people out and training them and getting them to network and that sort of thing. Matt, can you give us a bit of a for those that don't know your journey, your story to get here? What were those steps? Because you've been in the industry for a few minutes.
Well, thanks for that wonderful introduction. And I do think that I would now place the word storyteller at the front of my job title. And it's something that I've spent the last few years really deep diving into. What does it mean to be a good storyteller? How do we tell better stories about anything, much less ourselves? So thank you for recognizing that. And that's something I would encourage anybody who's listening, if they are looking for ways to grow. Storytelling has an immense kind of ROI that we tend to overlook. But my story began back in 2006. I purchased a vacation rental business, which was at the time the only place to stay in the historic district of Casco Viejo, Panama, which at the time was still a developing neighborhood. It was still is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but it had experienced years of decay, to the point that the majority of the residents were squatters in town. And it was not the most savory place to be. In fact, most taxi drivers, if you ask them to take you to Casco Viejo, they'd be like, why would you want to go there? You're going to get robbed. And in fact, they were right. There was all kinds of safety issues that earned the neighborhood its reputation. But I was smitten. And I had stayed in this vacation rental fleet. It had given me an entirely new understanding of the destination. And frankly, I didn't even know that short-term rentals was a category at that point. I just knew it was a place to stay. And wow, that opened my eyes to this destination in a way that really spoke to my heart. And I was so excited and I was so enamored that I bought that business, and for a solid 5 years ran the only place to stay in town. And as a young hospitality idiot, that is a great place to learn, because there's no one to take your place. So myself and my business partner, who was a friend from college, made all the mistakes in the book. But we also kind of got to understand what it meant to be a community leader, because at that time there were so few businesses in town in general. We kind of had to take responsibility for the environment around us. And ultimately that meant, for me, the street gangs who were contributing to the majority of the violence. Myself and another business owner ended up creating a gang demobilization program. So we put together a team and a methodology that first intervened in the gang behavior. So we took them to the jungle and we sat down with each group and really examined, is this something you're ready to commit to? And asked them to sign agreements that, yes, we do want proper opportunity to participate in this community. And then ultimately walk them through a 10-week intervention program, teaching these young guys how to become participating members of the community again, which even simple things like shaking someone's hand or washing
Yeah.
yourself. These are skills that these guys hadn't necessarily learned. And ultimately, that program became my life. That became the majority of how I spent my days. We ended up demobilizing all 5 gangs in Casco Viejo. And it was directly correlated with my business because over time, my guests were now able to come and not only not get robbed or shot by street gangs, but actually meet them and support their businesses, from
Mm.
walking tours to retail shops. It was a really sort of innovative solution to a very serious problem, and I don't think it could be replicated necessarily elsewhere.
Yeah.
Those were very formative years for me. It kind of taught me
Sure.
what it takes to make a community tick.
And did you when you were doing that, did you have someone that you could follow in terms of figuring out how to do it, or was it sort of like we'll have to iterate and figure out how we're going to do this as we go?
It was a combination. So we started with a blank canvas, and this was actually quite an exhilarating exercise. We sat down and
Sure.
said, no budget. What should we do? What would we do? What would we like to do? No limits, no playbook, no training, certainly no government coming in to solve this problem. So let's just throw some crazy ass ideas out there onto the canvas and see what sticks. And ultimately, our vision coincided with experts. So people who
Yeah.
had become experts
Understand.
over the years
Yeah.
in psychology and sociology, and
Yeah.
one guy who we referred to as the gang whisperer of Panama, Gilberto Toro, built this team, raised some funds from local businesses. Like, we need to do this. Let's try this incredibly crazy, maybe it just might work idea. Let's try this with the first gang. And somehow it worked. Somehow
Mm.
that first intervention worked. And we knew the program had a future when their rivals came and said, where's our intervention?
Huh.
Where's our opportunity? So that was kind of like
And it,
nudging
so
us in the
and
right direction.
and it was the payoff for them was opportunity. That was the biggest carrot, right?
Yeah, it just so happens that, like, living in a crummy little place and being scared that you're going to get shot out is not a life that someone wants to live.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I completely can empathize with that. Wow. Okay. So I'm so glad I asked this question. And so this project and this program would have opened your eyes to being able to really make impactful change for people and for businesses beyond what you're doing as a hospitality host, but actually going, I can take a lot of this skill set. I know how to get people together, create teams. I know how to engage with community and talk to them in the right way, which and kind of get something, get onto their side and get something out of them.
That's you put that perfectly into words, because it was a master's degree in community building, in real
Mm,
world community building.
yeah.
You had to get right up close and personal to all of these stakeholders, from the gang members to their wives, to their kids, to our guests, to our teammates,
Mm,
to the government. Like, this is real world stuff. And
mm,
what I learned there is, wow, if you can actually create a place where different stakeholders in any given community, neighborhood, market can come together, diverse stakeholders, not just a whole bunch of business owners, not just a whole bunch of politicians, a diverse group of stakeholders. And if you can identify what why we like this place. What is it in common that we are attracted to this place? And it just so happens that everybody in a destination like Casco Viejo is attracted to this place for the same kinds of reasons.
mhm.
It's this beautiful history, and it's right on the water, and it's convenient, and it's the tourism destination, and it's up and coming. It's like we all had these um, common reasons for appreciating the community. And so I kind of used that little paradigm and applied it to short-term rentals. And back in those days, there was no online information for
Mhm.
vacation rental professionals. Bart, your listeners might appreciate this because this is a little snapshot of the times. I decided I wanted to make an ebook to teach people how I was driving direct bookings back before Airbnb existed, how I was driving direct bookings and what was working.
Yeah.
And I made this great ebook that I was so proud of, still am to this day, called Boost Occupancy. And it had like 50 tips that I was convinced were going to generate like a boost in direct bookings. And for that reason, $97 was a deal, a steal. Okay. So here's the best part. I had just read, what's his name? Tim Ferriss's book,
Yeah.
The 4 Hour Work Week. And
Yeah.
he talked about using Google Ads to split test, to A/B test ad copy as it relates to sales.
Yeah.
So I made 4 independent websites, all selling the exact same ebook for the exact same price, but each of these 4 domains were geared towards a different vertical. So I had bed and breakfasts, hotels, resorts, and the 4th one, vacation rentals. And vacation rentals crushed them. Like we drove a couple $100 in Google Ads, and vacation rental ebook sales crushed the competition. So what that said to me was, wow, there's something here. I don't know what it is, but I need to unite these people somehow.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the birth of VRMB, Vacation Rental Marketing Blog, which started off with these ebooks piecemeal and evolved into an online community, which is still running to this day, more than 1,200 members around the world.
That's so crazy. So we started our business in 2019, so a few years after you, Matt, and the same realization happened as well with what we were doing in terms of our messaging, and we're quite agnostic across the accommodation industry. You know, direct bookings. It doesn't matter if you're a hotel, a bed and breakfast. It's got a lot of the same triggers that you're working with. Maybe the systems are a little bit different, but from a guest perspective, you're trying to book something online. And it didn't take very long before short-term rentals, vacation rentals were sort of the linchpin of engagement, right? People are like, oh, I'm really interested and really wanting to learn more. And that mission for community, actually, it's really interesting as well, because you created yours back then, but it's still a never-ending evolution. People still don't have that community as a whole, and particularly, I think in other industries I mean, other verticals of accommodation. So hotels, motels, yes, there's community, but not in the same way that you've got with short-term rentals, which is amazing for our industry. But there's still that lack of well, there's still the opportunity to do more to get us together, I think.
Indeed. Community building is hard, and it takes groundwork, and it takes hours and years.
Mm.
And it takes leading, I think, with a clear set of values. I think a lot of communities tend to get diluted or sidetracked or um, lose traction because there are not a clear set of guidelines. What are we trying to do here? And what are we not? And
Yeah.
that's ultimately also a really valuable way of identifying your niche is who exactly are we trying to help here, and what do we stand for in that capacity, but also who is maybe not for us. And for VRMB, we identified pretty quickly that if you're looking to get rich off Airbnb, we're not the community for you.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of other groups that can help you, or at least that will tell you they can help you do that. And when those values, when those guidelines are clear and you adhere to them as the leader, I think that's the longevity. That's the trust that's built between community members. In the same way, that's the trust that's built between neighbors. If you see a neighbor day after day, month after month, year after year, adhering by a certain kind of code that you respect, maybe they're picking up trash every now and then they see it. Maybe they're chipping into the local community project. If they're an upstanding citizen, if they have integrity, if they have personality, if they're generous, like these business values, I don't think necessarily fit previously into our business school lectures.
Sure.
But today I see them as kind of the big differentiators. This is what people are actually craving.
Yeah. If that get it together. So Um, I want to be mindful of our time, and that's why I've kind of took a moment to breathe, because I think you and I could definitely go down many different rabbit holes of exploring. Right, that's how I would quantify our interaction: exploring and sharing. But I think that what before we jumped on, one of the things that you mentioned was you've got VRMB that community that you've built. We talked about conferences and events, and where have you been? What are you doing? And uh, you talked about the fact that over the past few years you've done smaller community get-togethers or gatherings. I'll let you put it into your words. And now that the vision has adjusted. Now, before we go into visions, which is adjusted, because those events that you did were only 20 people at a time, there were a lot that didn't get the opportunity to get behind that curtain and really understand what goes on at these events, apart from looking on LinkedIn and seeing you guys all together, and then maybe some Lego. So beyond that, it's like, from my perspective, I've actually got no idea what you were really up to. So if you could share a bit about that and maybe where you're going to next, I'd really appreciate it.
I love that outside perspective. It's just, what are all these adults doing with Legos? So yes, folks, there is an exercise that I love that involves Legos, but it is not a Lego-based retreat. The retreats, the workshops, because I've started doing these with teams as well, are all designed under a similar kind of premise. And that is that as leaders in this very quickly changing marketplace, as hospitality leaders, wherever you happen to be based, there's this side of the business that we haven't necessarily prioritized for a very good reason. And the side of the business is creativity. And the reason why we have not nurtured it a whole lot is because what's happened over the last decade is our very nascent, very fragmented, very unpredictable industry of short-term rentals is so unpredictable for a guest to book that the gold standard on behalf of operators became this baseline set of actual standards, like standardization. Like, if you're going to come and stay at a professional operator's business, it's going to be clean. It's going to be safe. It's going to have passed all of the standard operating procedures put in place. Like, that became a luxury in the shared accommodation space. And I don't think we can underscore that enough. Many of the leading managers made a fortune off a baseline level of standardization. And I might even go as far as to call that professionalism. Defining what it means to be a professional is probably a separate podcast. But there's a baseline of consistency, of trust, of integrity, of standards, standardization, that really has become our wheelhouse over the years. And I would put myself in that category. And I've gotten to see a number of people leverage that set to do fantastic. Now, that becomes a bit of an issue when our entire world is so focused on controlling these gazillion variables that go into vacation rental management. It is famously operationally complex business. When you're so focused on controlling all of those variables, and you're so focused on efficiencies, and you're so focused on standard operating procedures in order to scale, you become rigid. And that rigidity does not fare well in change. And this is where a whole new side of the business, whether you want to call it creativity, imagination, innovation, flexibility, thinking outside the box, these are things we have not necessarily been practicing. In fact, they've been obscured. So the whole premise for the retreats is in order to incorporate more of this creative side of ourselves, really, and our businesses, we need an intervention, because there's no way that these new innovations are coming from inside of that grind. We need to stop. We need someone to stop us, because we're control freaks and we work really hard and we will continue doing it until someone stops us in some cases. We need an intervention. We need to stop what we're doing. We need to be taken out of that environment, and we need to go somewhere new. The premise of the retreats is that we're going to go somewhere new together. We're going to go somewhere that's beautiful, somewhere that's peaceful. I love hosting events at farms where nature is inviting you to go for a walk and to process some of the really critical discussions that are taking place. So what's actually taking place at these retreats are deep dives into what does a next leap, a next innovation look like for me and my organization. And when you detach from the grind and you go somewhere peaceful and you are working together with, whether it's a team member or a stranger, if you're being intellectually challenged to go somewhere new, you end up coming to some conclusions, some epiphanies that you could not have inside the grind. And then you bring back that new excitement, that new energy, that new clarity, or maybe that new doubt. Maybe something that you always thought suddenly is in doubt. Maybe something new was whispering at you, and at a retreat you realize, like, wow, now is my chance to do this thing. So you bring back with you this new kind of energy. And the whole idea here is that it's not just a one retreat and poof, I'm a creative guy. It's more like, I need to start doing more of this more frequently. I need to invest more time and energy learning to be more creative. And that part has been the last like 2 years of my life. I've just gone on a huge deep dive to conferences, to workshops. I hired consultants. Like, what does it mean to be more creative? What does it mean to think more outside the box? What is the case for more creativity in business? And I believe we're onto something very huge. And I believe it's not just vacation rentals, and it's not just hospitality. It's the entire economy is a victim of that rigidity that we've been refining over the years, and can use this new element of artistic, creative, authentic, imaginative ways of thinking. So that's really the premise of the retreats, is we're going to do that for you. We're gonna toss you into that deep end and make sure that you don't drown. But the lesson here is that anybody can and should be doing these kinds of discoveries.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more on the necessity to create and innovate, and that it's a huge opportunity. Last night I was out in the Dandenong Ranges. You'd love it, Matt. Like in the massive trees in the forest. You drive out for an hour or two out of the city, and huge sense of community, people coming together, and I was teaching everybody about AI, and for a lot of them, ChatGPT, how to use it, how it works, and just sort of that they get the fundamentals so they can understand how it's going to impact their businesses in the future. And as we're going through it, I think towards like an hour in, one of the members stands up and says, "But Bart, it's not very creative. Every time I try to do social media posts, it just doesn't work." And the reality is that these tools, they're probably going to make things quite bland, and that creativity, that's probably going to probably, because we don't know, Matt, maybe the bots will become that good that they'll be more creative than us, but we don't know. But
They
it's probably,
will.
yeah, but right now it's one of those things that can differentiate us. But if you don't mind, I do want to go back just one step, because you said something about rigidity, inflexibility. And if we look at businesses that have gone out of business, like a Blockbusters, and those sort of business models that aren't creative or adapted to change, then they can really struggle. But do you seriously think that that's an issue within accommodation or vacation rentals, that if you don't change, you're going to become a blockbuster? Like, is that as far down the train that we are, or is it a little bit different?
1000%. I've already seen plenty of businesses shutter. I've seen plenty of people burn out. I've seen plenty of people sell to a bigger operator that's able to run it in a more efficient manner. But it's all the exact same thing. If you don't start incorporating this stuff now, let's just take the AI thing to an extreme. Let's just say AI will be able to do all those things way better than we can. Let's just say all the automation and technology will improve exponentially. What does that leave for you? The answer is that you got to figure out what you're really passionate about. And you need to make that the center of your business moving forward. And this is the reinvention I'm talking about. And can an AI run short-term rental management operation compete with an authentic, more creative management company that's flexible, that's able to adapt to change? No. The world is desperate for this combination of the two, a combination of standardization with individuality and personality. Like that is the absolute gold mine that all of our colleagues are in a position, just perfect position to excavate. But they have to take the steps, because the answer to your question is they will get disrupted no matter what.
Yeah. And so if we talk about individuality, we talk about creativity, and I understand the desperate need to be creative and change things. I was talking to a friend yesterday who runs a cleaning business, and runs it online and has to do the SEO and all these sorts of things. And we talked about, once businesses get to a certain scale, then it's really hard for them to change, be it an IBM or whatever, that, like, getting you're so big, or you've created all those systems, that now if you want to put a new system in, you can't really do it. And then people come in from behind you and they can do it overnight. And it's like, how did you do that so quickly? It's because we created a structure of rigidity around what we did, and we can't move things because it's just too much work and too much effort. From what you're saying, it's the first part is becoming aware that you need to be able to be flexible and to do those changes.
If your team meetings are emphasizing creativity as a business value, in whatever way works for you, if you're reinforcing that with your team, if you're giving team members the leeway to think creatively about solving problems, to think authentically about their communication, if that's part of your culture and you're doing that on a regular basis, then you actually have that kind of flexibility built into the system in a way. That's the ultimate combination. But I think it's a very fundamental shift that the leadership needs to recognize, because you can't just say, okay, be more creative and put that word up on the wall and assume that your team is going to be more creative. No one knows what that means.
Sure.
So the whole point is that there is no one set definition. The definition is going to be tailored to you and your operation. What does it mean to be a more creative in Australia? That's going to be something completely different from what it means to be creative for me in Miami. That's the beauty of it. But it deserves discussion and it deserves exploration. And once people start to realize, wow, once I start having these conversations, I'm unearthing all kinds of layers and possibilities that I never would have thought about before. That's when you start to be like, connect the dots and say, okay, now I see the ROI here. Now I see the business case for taking some time off and doing a discovery with my team or with a specialist, because we actually are going to have an innovation, or we're going to come to some level of clarity with our team. And I think every team needs to be doing that as frequently as they can afford.
Yeah. And tell me one thing. One thing that I was thinking about from what you were saying before was the bringing yourself into the business and your uniqueness or individuality and that sort of thing. And to me, it in a bad way kind of screams also the mantra of, oh, you need a picture on your website of you, of Matt, and in front of the accommodation and that sort of thing. And that was sort of like industry led, or the experts saying that's the way you've got to do it. But I don't think that's what you like. For me personally, and we might disagree, which would be cool, but maybe we don't. But I just find it can be quite tacky, and it's not necessarily the vision. You don't have to incorporate yourself by having a picture of yourself. You can do it in a much more subtle way that works more about values, about everything else. Where do you what are you telling people to do when they're incorporating themselves?
I'll give you an example that happened to me at the airport. I went to this new Dallas terminal, and the entire terminal has been gutted and remodeled, and it's all managed by one company. So, like normal airport terminals have all these different weird little kiosks and
Yeah,
different shops and different areas to sit and things that, what places to plug in, etc. This terminal was completely remodeled, all managed by one company, and all the restaurants had iPads at the chairs with no people in the operation. And in fact, even in the more comfortable chairs by the side, they too had iPads. So you could order from any of the Italian, Japanese, coffee, brewery. You could order anything from what was actually a central kitchen back
yeah,
behind the scenes, and it would be delivered to you by a person. And I can't tell you how confused I was, because I wanted to hate it so bad because it's not human. It's all just a machine. But at the same time, I got great sushi in like 10 minutes, and it was a great value. And the person that delivered it actually had a wonderful personality. We ended up talking for like 20 minutes. So I think the answer to the question is each of us has to determine what is that blend for us. And if you're more of a private person, maybe you're not showing your face on the screen, but you're definitely compensating with something equally personal or local or authentic. Whereas if you are super outgoing and you do want to be front and center, like, be careful how much you share, because it's not necessarily professional to talk about some things in front of guests. So I think, again, it just requires a discussion, more discussions to determine what is that blend that I want for my business? What is my vision as technology enables my hospitality? I don't think there's one answer, and that's not what guests are looking for anyway. They're looking for everyone to be a little bit different and unique.
yeah. Um, I love that airport story, by the way. I used to work in online ordering, and that was one of the things that we talked about, and we argued about it incessantly. And my point of view, the argument was everyone's going to order from their mobile phones, and my argument was everyone's going to order from a tablet. And had they, in that circumstance, said, "Hey, Matt, scan the QR code, make the order," you probably would have been a lot less likely to do it than if you were actually sitting down. The tablet's there; they make it really easy. Two seconds, you're in. You get the shop, you scan your card or swipe your card, and you're out. So that's fascinating. And next time I'm in Dallas, I'll have a look at that, because I have spent a fair bit of time in that airport, but I haven't seen that yet. So I can completely see that changing when we as we get towards kind of wrapping up. We've already started to run over time. Um, eh, the One of the things that you had said before as well is we kind of need to do this as an industry. We need to go down this path, and we need to make these changes or be aware of them. Can you kind of explore that a little bit more for me and explain what you mean by kind of like more of an industry?
For anything outwardly to change in the world, we need to change ourselves first. And that change for me, based on what I've observed over the last 10 years of industry growth, is that reinvention of ourselves as operators, that choice to incorporate more of this creative, authentic side of our business, that is a choice, because you don't have to go there. You could say, I'm sticking with my old plan, I'm not changing at all, and that's your prerogative. But I believe that choice, I'm so confident that it makes for a deeper business operator. It makes for a deeper, more meaningful relationship with anyone in your organization, including your guests. It is like the big unlock for anyone who's listening here to have this in mind if you haven't already. Because with all this change, it becomes more and more important that you have done this. Because when that big tsunami hits and you need to be ready to move on the fly, you want to be in a position where you can do that. And you can do that in an organic way and not like a completely destructive way. And that's, by the way, what we see people being destructive, that's because they're so rigid that they can't handle any of the change.
Yeah.
So I believe as operators, first and foremost, we need to reinvent ourselves. We need to get clearer on what's important to us as entrepreneurs. That needs to take new priority in our business set of values. We need to communicate that to our team, why it's important that we need to focus more on authenticity, why guests are searching for more authentic, tech-enabled experiences. We need to communicate that to our teams. And ultimately, that is what creates an outward change in the industry. There is no other way to do it. Like, there's not going to be some savior coming along and saying, here's the new organization that we all belong to. Poof, change. Not going to happen. The change comes from those who are willing to change. And I believe that by leading with these kinds of values, you're actually attracting a pretty fun kind of person. You know, I know on your screen there before the interview, it said, have fun. That's like me too. Like, that's why we get along. Like, it's about this more human, more passionate element to what we do. I believe if we're leading with that, I believe if that's how we feel, if we're having fun and we're doing what we're passionate about, if we don't know what we're passionate about, we're exploring what that is. That is the infectious energy that changes the entire industry. That is the creativity that reinvigorates the professional side, which has become stale.
Mm.
And I'm not discounting that whole set of professional standards, which is still key. It's both of these things that are now necessary to truly innovate.
Yeah, a really great example of this need for change is in sort of restaurants, hospo, traditional places where you would go, and a lot of businesses that were doing it right before COVID, they've come out, they've done really well, and now it's kind of like, okay, what's next? How do we draw people in? And they've got all sorts of problems, be it with inflation, cost of living, things are going to get hard. They're going to get really messy out there. And you can see it. It's with a restaurant. The great thing is because you can walk in and you can just see, oh, it's full or it's not full, or you can feel the energy, right? You can't feel that in a vacation rental. You can't feel that scale. You can look at the numbers at the end of the day and go, are we doing well? Aren't we doing well? And yes, you standardize the business. You've made everything great, but yet there's just something that can be kind of lacking to stay competitive, to stay in the market, and to really understand it. And I would argue as well, Matt, is that youth is really important as well, to kind of come through and encourage them to come and share their experience and their life, their world, to help us kind of push our businesses forward.
Yeah, for sure. It's all, I think of it as it requires being more courageous and taking more risks as individuals on ourselves and on our businesses, going places that we haven't necessarily gone before and unknown, because it's not the linear growth that we were practicing before. It's not the control, it's something new. Letting that in is the whole name of the game.
Yeah. Scary stuff, Matt. Scary stuff. Because you got to be vulnerable, right?
And exhilarating, because
Exactly.
we can do this, and it actually, you can thrive in this kind of environment. This reminds me of the days that I got started in vacation rentals, because there was just this huge ocean of opportunity waiting for people to actually do it in a new level. That's what we're at right now with all this commoditization taking place. This is the path that you want to go. This is how you distinguish yourself. This is it.
Yeah, yeah. Matt, look, I'm going to wrap us up because we've hit the end of our hour. I really enjoyed talking to you and sharing these sorts of conversations, and I think we could probably do them for hours and hours and hours on end, and just really get pretty deep on some of these concepts as well. And that's the one thing that I guess pains me a bit, is that we start on this and we're so sort of surface level, just skirting around the edges of what the real meaning and that sort of thing. But look, a few things. One, what is the best way for people to engage with you and your community if they did want to come to one of these retreats?
I have a new landing page. It's heregoesnothing.com. That's an American colloquialism that's just like, oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to bet on myself. It's my research into this world of creativity and more imagination in business. And I'm so convinced that this is the path that I certainly want for myself, and that I want to share with my colleagues in terms of best practices. Sign up. I'll be sharing stuff that I'm learning along the way, and also hosting actual events so that people who think this way can meet other people, and be challenged in that new way.
So that's heregoesnothing.com, and that's without the G. I will also share this in the show notes. Now, the other one that I had, this was a little bit cheeky. That book that you said about the 50 book direct tips, is that still available? Is it a giveaway now, or are we still paying the
No.
$97?
It's a prized element of VRMB's vault. So you got to be a member of VRMB's community to access Boost Occupancy. The tips, I read them 3 weeks ago. They're still fantastic. I still stand by them. But if any of your listeners are especially intrigued by that, maybe we could offer them a preview copy as a little reason to join.
Amazing. Matt, you're wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's your evening, so last thing of the day, so I do appreciate it. Folks, if you are tuned in on the podcast, make sure you leave us a review. It makes a big difference to us. And make sure that you like and subscribe it on YouTube. I know that it's one of those things that we say that we encourage you to do, but it does make a massive difference, and it allows me to get great guests like Matt onto the show. Matt, have a fantastic rest of the day, bud.
You too, Bart. Nice chatting.
Thanks.